A bunch of the folks who built these systems, didn't actually think about hostile attack on them, didn't think about, what, Russians might do in order to hack it. Were trying in their own minds to figure out, well, okay, how are we democratic and inclusive as possible, and how do we build the algorithms that way? So
right.
I don't think there is any malintent, and I think that's an important thing. And I know all the folks, so I think I can assert that
right.
With some vigor. However, as you begin to get big, and as you begin to be having a very strong influence, your responsibility, with power comes responsibility,
right.
with great power comes great responsibility.
Right.
And so I think what's important is to start thinking proactively about what to do. And I think that one could argue that they're doing it a little too slowly, although as long as it's resolute and you're fixing it, I think that's important. I think one of the things that, and so people are talking about, well, can AI technology help with this stuff? How do you do multi-standards across multi-countries? What is the degree to which you can say you should block speech and other things? Well, what if we could generate a way of saying, look, give us a report along with whatever reporting, diversity metrics, other kinds of things, about what you're trying to do to promote positive speech. Mm-hmm. Like, what's the way that you're trying to create these engagement loops, as opposed to saying, well, whatever's engaging, that's what we're going to do. So it's, a burning person falling out of a building. Well, that's what it's all going to be. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, no. How is it you're actually creating positive engagement loops?
Right.
The company that was going to be able to set the kind of social network, social media standards in these things was the one that moved fastest to grow.
Sure.
And it is a nature of the society we live in that has competition between companies, including between these tech companies. The kinds of things in the early days talking about is like, oh, look, if we can connect people and they can share experiences and they can get to know people, not just, like they can have a greater neighborhood than the neighborhood they're in, or even revivify their neighborhood. All of these things bringing in the human fabric of life, of seeing other people as people, seeing pictures of them on, at the holiday or with their kids and that kind of stuff. Right. That was the stuff that was being discussed.
Right.
Right. And so it's all the positive use cases. But it is equally, of course, important now that we say, look, now that you have a massive number of daily active users. I don't know what the current number is, 1.5 billion something. Yeah. Now that you have that, you now have responsibility, and you need to lean into that, and you need to figure out how do you help solve this problem. And I think one of the key things about this is to say, well, what are the ways that we can either increment what is in the current parlance as terms of service, because we're all private businesses, and you can say, look, if this is your business, you can take your business elsewhere. Articulate something around that, right? Like we are actually, in fact, this is the way that we articulate our kind of opposition to hate speech and hatred. We enable discussion, but we don't enable, essentially, oppression. Human beings are messy. People do say insulting and inflammatory things. And that will happen within a democracy and kind of politics and so forth. However, what we should try to do is say, and this is part of the reason I was saying these are private businesses, is they can say, look, if you want to do this kind of like, for example, racist hate speech and that kind of stuff, do it somewhere else. Mm-hmm. You can create your own social network for that. There's a lot of anti-technologist folks who go, look at that bad technology thing, that should be stopped, right? That's not my approach. I actually am enough of a techno-optimist that I think you can shape it in a way that's very positive. Now, the reason I'm positive on the attacks is I want to create a dynamic of, oh shit, this is really important. Okay, we're going to do something about it. We're going to start making, product managers whose metrics, are the right metrics in this. We're going to start reporting it to the world about what we're thinking about doing and what we're doing and who we are and what we're about. And I think that will be the end result of the criticism. Well, what I'd really love to see is say, okay, which positive emotions and which kinds of amplification of that can we do to create an overall mix? Study the results of the things we have and saying, look, we're just putting our, kind of our pinky on the scale to just have to rebalance towards more of those, because that's more of the society we want to be. It's more of the community we want. I think I'd get much more aggressive on the anti-bot stuff and try to figure out how to, like, for example, like, is there a possibility that the tech companies can work together on identifying bots and say, we're just going to get rid of those. Yeah. I think also, I think a version of what I was saying, which is say, look, again, the natural thing. But it's the same thing on television. You show, the fire, you show the explosion, you show the catastrophe, because we as humans respond to that more en masse. Is say, look, how do you promote more kind of positive connection? How do you promote more? Oh, this was a great story of heroism or of compassion,
and then promote it further.
And promote it further. Yeah. But what happens is it starts with some ideas from some people who are kind of naturally friends. They hire the people they know. They get in this whirlwind tornado, which I call blitzscaling, and they tend to hire the people they know in terms of doing that. And that tends to create, and they just think, oh, culture is everything. We don't need this diversity. And it's like, no, actually, in fact, you need to create that culture from the beginning. And so I think that the kind of thing is to make sure that you have that kind of playbook. So like, I think one of the good things that's coming about is most of the VCs that I know and like working with, not all of them, the species has some problems, are like now asking, like, what are you doing in diversity in your company? What are you doing in diversity in your board? How are you doing?
Part of the investment.
Yes, and making it part of the conversation from the very beginning. And it doesn't mean that you have to like, oh, by month 3, you have to have done something, but it's just like, for example, when we do, partner recruiting, every single time we talk about like, well, how are we expanding our diversity in terms of doing that? And that's always present in the conversation. And I think that at least puts you on the right path. One of the examples I heard that was really interesting is part of the New York Police Department training is in induction and early training is they have 2 of the white officers kind of pushing 2 of the black officers up against the wall with guns, and they say, what's that? That's an arrest. And then they reverse it, and it says, what that says, robbery. And they use that in order to try to explode these biases and actually really get a sense of understand what's going on, see people for who they are, understand that you have biases that you need to correct against. And I could see actually both VR and AR being very helpful in kind of that kind of induction. Like, for example, let's say, like right now, it's super important to do the anti-sexual harassment training, but you can imagine it'd be a whole lot better if it actually hit you more emotionally and you understood what the other side felt like, because of course part of the problem with white straight guys is they usually just don't know, whoa, is that insulting? And you're like, yes. And so, but part of I think the hope in these technologies is more of a visceral experience, because it's once you begin to realize how it's heard, how it actually feels like disrespect, how it feels like assault, and that's actually how it feels, then that's the beginning by which you can begin to understand that stuff. And for me, my growing up from being a teenager was at Stanford. They had all kinds of classes on this, and I went to some of these classes, and it was literally eye-opening. It was like, oh God, people do that? And oh, of course you hear it this way. Like, that was actually important. I think we need that broader within society, and one of the things about technology is allow scale.
Is there any technology you think that could solve this problem? You're the big technologist.
So solve within the messiness of human beings, no. Improve, yes. Look, part of the whole thing within AI and tech is to try to say, what is the design goal that's essentially symbiotic? And like, for example, one of the things that's interesting when you begin thinking about, for example, AI tutors or AI work is how does that also try to improve compassion and empathy? Because we know that's our better selves, and that's the thing we want the whole society to head towards. What we need to do is, as we create these kind of high-powered technologies, how in interaction does it help us bring out our better selves? I think that should be part of the design goal for how we're looking at it. And that's part of the reason why I started thinking about, like, okay, what should the companies be reporting on? It was like, okay, how am I actually having a good theory of improving compassion and empathy, and how am I tracking against that? Is actually, in fact, would be a good contribution.